This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is part 2 of flyer number 404, entitled Details on Women's Career Mother Timeline. That's CMT. Carrying straight on. This flyer offers such concrete advice, giving concrete numbers, that is ages, since millions of young women will need to plan their lives with specific ages, specific numbers, to make their lives practical so that they can do it all, that is, be a female careerist and be a mother in a timely manner. This flyer also tries to take a broader view on when women should have kids from the perspective of those politicians who are concerned with demographics, with population policies, etc. The feminist and masculist views have already been expressed, but what about the points of view of the political demographers? In many countries now, the birth rate is well below the replacement rate, in brackets, of 2.1 children per mother. In South Korea, for example, the birth rate is under 1 child per woman, so the South Koreans will wipe themselves out in just a few generations. In Japan, there is even a minister, a high-ranking politician, of population who is desperately trying to boost the birth rate, but is failing dismally, mostly because he/she has no understanding of masculist ideas and does not understand why so many men reject marriage and paternity due to the toxicity of the divorce courts, taken over by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites who want equal rights with men in the parliaments but expect to behave as fluffy parasites in the divorce courts. So, if you are a bi-conscious masculist, that is, you have had both your feminist and masculist consciousnesses raised, and you are a politician concerned with the birth rate, what would your political program be? What would your manifesto be with regard to raising the birth rate? Since you are bi-conscious, you will understand why so many men are rejecting marriage and paternity. So you would push for the men-fairing of the gender laws and push for the legislation of the paternity rejection right, so that men will become more willing to be fathers again. Without such men-fairing of the gender laws, reform of the divorce courts, the passage of the etc., there will be no stopping the birth rate from crashing, and hence the population crashing, wiping out whole cultures. But even when the masculists achieve their political goals of living in a FIP society, that is, one in which girls are raised by parents and educated by teachers to be FIPs, with the gender laws men-faired, the para-legislated, etc., that may still leave women emphasising their careers so strongly that they still don't have their 2.1 kids. So what can be done? As a bi-conscious demographics politician, I would use governmental propaganda to influence the personal decisions of young women by promoting what could be called here the have-it-all plan, or the career mother timeline, CMT. I would be thinking longer term, that if the birth rate is not greater than 2.1 kids per woman, then sooner or later whole populations are wiped out. There's no way round this logic. Just how quickly this logic needs to be applied is debatable, since one cannot deny that the paternity strike of men will have considerable impact on the global warming problem. With 2/3 of young men in many countries now rejecting paternity, that will cause the population to decrease, which, if drastic enough, will cause the Earth's population to diminish to the point that global warming stops, since there will be much less CO2 sent into the atmosphere, so the polar caps melt less, so sea levels rise less, so coastal cities are less flooded, etc. So I can imagine that global political leaders may encourage the fluffy feminists to continue financially massacring divorcing fathers, so that the MGTOW and masculist movements continue to reject marriage and paternity as a solution to the global warming problem. This sounds contradictory to what was said above, that the demographic politicians should men-fair the gender laws. Yes, it is, so it's a matter of timing. Perhaps for the next generation or two, men should be encouraged not to be fathers, so that the population does fall radically. Then a U-turn is made by the government to encourage men to be fathers again, by men-fairing the gender laws. I'm advocating a strong dose of social engineering here. So, jump ahead a few generations when the global warming problem has been contained, but the population is still dropping, so things have to change, or we wipe ourselves out. Let us assume the gender laws have been men-faired, but that women remain the problem by preferring their careers over having children, so governments need to persuade women to have kids. Here is where the career mother timeline comes in, the CMT. The CMT can be pushed by governments to encourage women to be both careerists and mothers, thus satisfying women's desires to have a challenging and satisfying career and to have their 2.1 kids, so as not to indirectly wipe out whole populations. The question now is, what should the ideal timeline be for such women? I assume that the timeline I'm proposing is aimed at the upper middle class. Other people can devise similar plans for the lower classes who don't have the intelligence to go to university. This is my upper middle class CMT for young women. It is concrete and specific for young women to study. It's based on several assumptions. A. Women need to have their 2 kids. B. They need to have these 2 kids early enough in their lives so that their biological clocks are still ticking. C. Societies have to be structured so that women can be both mothers and careerists in the same person. How to do this? Assume the woman is a member of the upper middle class, so goes to university. Assume that the masculist movement has become extremely powerful, so that the young woman has been persuaded by masculist ideas to study career competent majors at high school and college, so that she can be a real careerist, earning good money, so that she's not a fluffy parasite and hence hated and ignored by the masculists, who by this time will be most men. So she graduates at age 21, gets a master's at 23, then works in a career with a well-paying salary, pulling her weight financially, not parasiting off her husband or male partner. She then works for, say, 5 years, making her 26 or 28, and during that time she has married her husband with the intention on both their parts to have children, which is something that the government pushes in its advertising and gives the couple substantial child grants to stimulate them to have kids. She has her first kid at age 27 to 29, and her second kid 2 years later at age 29 to 31, so that both kids are born well within her fertility window. Laws need to be passed so that while the mother is at home looking after the small children, the wage loss is made up by the government, say for 6 years. That is, the time necessary for the second child to start kindergarten. The woman, the mother, can then return to work, perhaps part-time, and be subsidised by the government for lost income compared to working full-time. Schools need to be given well-funded child-minding facilities so that mothers can work full-time and pick up their kids after they finish work. Fathers too. When both kids are off to school, the mother works full-time at a well-paid career, usually in the same field as she worked in before having kids, so that she has already 5 years of experience in that field under her belt. She then works full-time until her kids are off her hands, say for another 17 years, until her 2 kids are working themselves in their 5-year career slot. Once the kids are off the couple's hands, then what they do with their financial lives is their business. Perhaps they want to earn a lot more to save for an affluent retirement, or choose to work part-time and take time off work to travel, enjoy themselves, etc. From the masculist point of view, having nearly all women being real FIPs is obviously liberating for men, freeing men from decades of manslavery to hated fluffy parasites. It is in masculist self-interest that women achieve a lot more political power in the parliaments, so that having children is encouraged if we are not to wipe ourselves out. The above CMT, that's career mother timeline for women, is also advantageous for women because they get to have the best of both worlds. They have their careers and they have their 2 kids, thus fulfilling their duty to the state, that is, their duty to posterity. Women will need to have a lot more power in the parliaments in order to muscle through the financing of the earnings loss when the mother is at home with the very small children, breastfeeding them, etc. There's not much point in an upper-class woman hiring a nanny and a wet nurse to feed and raise her children, because what is the point of having the kids in the first place from the point of view of the mother? In effect, such an arrangement would be paying for another woman to raise one's kids. After the babies are weaned, then the father can stay at home looking after the kids for some days of the week instead of the mother, bonding with his kids during the 6 years before the second kid is off to kindergarten. A lot more detailed thought needs to be devoted to these questions by microeconomists, by feminists and masculists, since the CMTs such as the above will have an impact on everyone, on women, on men, on societies, on whole population sizes. There is a lot at stake here and requires further thought. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 400 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.